No!
Hello, everybody. This is Matei Gheorghiu, and you're tuning into Key Culture podcast with me and my colleague, as always.
Niilo Tarnanen.
Hi, Niilo. And today we have Corina Ciuplea, who is, no, I want to say copyist again, but it's not, how was it?
A music engraver.
Music engraver.
Music engraver. So she's editing scores and parts. And Corina is also a cellist and an event organizer. Let's see if we have time to talk about that, but we wanted to invite her because she has a job that it's rather important in our circles, in classical music circles, but it's a job we never really hear much about. So we don't know what people who are music engravers or copyists do. We know that someone makes all those scores, someone checks all those parts, but we don't really have to deal with them much. If we do, then we just send the score and then we get them back. So now, today, hopefully, we're gonna get a bit more of the internal makings of score making. So, hello to you, Corina.
Hi, thank you so much for your invitation.
Of
I'm
course,
so
of course. And this is also nice for me because now I'm not the only Romanian who has been on this podcast. So
Yay.
you're the first Romanian to be our guest, but not the first one to be in the show since I'm always here. Let's dig into the first question. So you are an independent professional editor, from what I understand. How is your daily life like? How does it go?
Well, it's pretty crazy. I mean, 24 hours are not enough per day for me. Until a couple of years ago, I worked nonstop from 8 a.m. until midnight. So always writing music scores and having parts and done, but the main problem in this industry is that everything is last minute. So that's why I said that 24 hours sometimes are not enough, because it's crazy with the deadlines. Everything is in the last second. Now I take it a little bit easier because I have a small kid and I cannot work those insane hours. But I still try to work 6-8 hours per day. I have to, because otherwise orchestras won't have materials to play.
But I mean, like, sorry, Niilo, just a second. Yeah, so when you mean that you have crazy deadlines, well, how does the deadline usually go? Like you get the offer and then you have to deliver it, but why does it always go to last minute?
Because of last minute repertoire. I'm not sure. It depends on who's hiring me. If there is a composer, a personal composer, many times it happens that they are trying to do things on their own, and right before their performance they realize that it takes them a lot of time, and the material is not looking very good, and they are trying to provide a very good looking and correct material to the orchestra, and they call me in the last minute, like, can you help me out to deliver this? And even if they are not writing the score, even if they are making the manuscript, writing by hand everything, many people are composing until the last minute. So, or they are trying to do some corrections over their material. So yeah, there are not so many projects where you have like a couple of months to finish something. It's only a couple of weeks or days, or it depends. But this is the industry. I mean, everything is very, very fast.
Niilo.
All this said, it's pleasure we can have you here. It's very nice that you could have this time devoted to this visit in the podcast. Welcome, Corina.
Yeah, I got late to this interview with you because I printed all night scores for performance in the next few days. So I didn't sleep at all last night.
Oh no.
And I printed that till 15 minutes ago. So yeah,
Wait,
but it's normal.
So if a professional composer doesn't have time and they come to you with the scores, and then you have to work a lot to get it done in like very little time, but how does it go with, let's say, professional? Because you said that you are hired by professional orchestras or
yeah, well, I don't work so much with individuals, with composers, because this industry is a little bit expensive, I think. It's a lot of work to do and a lot of people involved in one score. It's not a good idea for me to work alone because you can make like errors. You need a proofreader, you need a team to work with you. So because of this team that you need, the costs can go really high for an individual. Of course, it depends on the work. If it's only chamber music or solo music, it's a little bit easier. But when we are talking about orchestra, there's a lot of work to do and a lot of scores to make and proofread everything and make sure everything is with high standards, you know. And usually, yeah, I don't work with so many individual composers. I work with publishing houses or let's call them agencies, because very big publishing houses, they don't usually hire, they don't have in-house engravers, not all of them, and they don't hire one person. Like I cannot work for, I don't know, let's say Peter's edition, you know. Usually they hire a company that has a team that can work material, you know. So I usually work with in this kind of teams which are managed by a company to deliver materials for multiple publishers. So I don't work only for one publisher, I work with an agency that has to deliver to multiple publishing houses.
so in the same, so let's say an orchestra or a publishing house, sorry, wants you to edit some orchestra score. So they send you the score, but they also send it to several other people, and then you work together even though you're in different places, or how?
Well, usually an orchestra or a publishing house, they only talk with one person, with the manager of the agency or the person who has this business, you know. And then it's like a chain of command. There's an editor, there's an engraver, there's a proofreader, and everybody knows what do they have to do, and they just work together. But the client, they work only with one person that communicates everything, you know. But there are not so many, I mean, on my side, there are not so many orchestras that are hiring me separately, because usually, especially in Europe, orchestras have their librarians, and usually they know a little bit of engraving, Sibelius or Finale. And if there are things to be changed or corrections to be made, they can make them in-house. So usually I work more with publishing houses than with private orchestras. In Romania, I work with many orchestras because they don't have librarians with knowledge of music. So,
But like, do you work with someone? I mean, if you say that you are hired by some editor from outside and they contact you, do they say that we want you to be the engraver or the proofreader or the editor or whatever for this project, or they expect you to have those people?
they expect me to have these people, of course. It's my responsibility, you know. If somebody calls me directly, and I see they send me the material that needs to be worked, the deadline, and I have to estimate how many people do I need, how much time do I need, and it's my responsibility. I mean, it's my name. I say, okay, I can do this or not. They don't care if I have to hire 10 people or 2. It's just my responsibility to do the material.
So do you have this company where you can like hire people to work on a certain project, or like you have other people than you?
Well, now in the last, I think it's already been 4 years, I work mainly for European Film Philharmonic Institute. It's like a publishing house for film scores. And I work with, I'm an editor there, not only an engraver, I'm an editor together with Alexander Matei, he's my colleague there. And we have so much work to do and so many scores to write. And it's super hard to find people to help us. I mean, even in the last month, we needed to hire like 4 or 5 people to help us with the materials, and we couldn't. It's a very tough industry because you don't have a chance to work in-house. I mean, even if you know a software, like let's say Sibelius, yeah, for example, it's like you're a photographer, and you say, well, I know Photoshop. That doesn't make you a good photographer just because you know Photoshop. So Sibelius is just a software, but just because you know it or not doesn't mean it's easy to make a orchestra score. You need to know many rules, and you need to know how what are the publishing standards, and how a score should look like, you know. So unfortunately, not so many people have the experience, even if they're very good engravers. And in company like this, the deadlines are really crazy, and I don't have the time to teach somebody because it will take me months, I think.
Niilo.
So.
Yes. So I would like to ask, so there is an editor, and there is the engraver, and there's the proofreader. So how does this, how does the division of the work go? So is the editor kind of the one who is in charge of the process and sees that everything's fine, and that the engraver is the one who actually puts all the notes and other graphical elements to their right places, and the proofreader then checks if there are any errors, and if there are, puts it back to the engraver, or how does it go?
Yeah, usually, so the editor is the higher person. The editor has to know all the house style, because every publishing house has their own rules. I mean, you have the international standard rules, which applies to all scores to look good. And but there are certain elements like fonts or sizes, or how to put cues or page turns, or so many details that are in charge of belongs to the house style of the publishing house. So you have the editor that takes all these decisions, you know, how to name the instruments, in which language, how to where to put things. Then you have the engraver. Sometimes the engraver can be the editor. I mean, if there's something super fast to be written, it's easier for me to write it than to explain someone else and waste time explaining what do they have to do. So the engraver can be the editor. So usually an editor tells the engraver how to do things, how to write them, because it's not a good idea just to copy a manuscript. It's not the composer's job to know all the rules, so you don't have to copy everything beside the music. But I mean the order of elements, or if the composer placed something in the wrong place, you don't have to just put it in the same place, you know, because it can be wrong. You have to adapt the material to some standards. So you have to train an engraver and tell him, like, ignore this or that, and do this, you know, based on the manuscript that you have. And then we have the proofreader, which is like super important, because beside wrong notes, he has to also know the house style like the editor, and the proofreader needs to check everything, that there are not elements floating around, that everything is in the correct place. So, and usually the material goes back again to the editor sometimes for the final checkup. But as a rule, it's not a good idea for the engraver to proofread the material, because your eyes can get very comfortable with some super obvious mistakes. You know, you just cannot see them. They're right there, and your eyes cannot see them.
Yeah, as a composer, I can say this myself, that one problem for me with making my scores is that I keep seeing and hearing through the playback the same things over and over again. So then you really get used to how it looks and how it sounds. And then if when it comes to how it sounds, you can even not like making changes because you got so used to how it sounds already. But even with how it looks, it's the same problem. And when I proofread my own scores, I find mistakes. But then if I sometimes give it to other people, they find other mistakes that I've overlooked so easily. And yeah, it's like even when you make parks, I need to take breaks simply because like my eyes are just gonna they're just gonna overlook a lot of stuff. So now let me ask you this. Let's say I am a publisher. I want you to write for me a score. So I contact you because you're a professional engraver, and I say, okay, Corina Ciuplea, please make me this score by, let's say, 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it is. From that point on, what do you do and what does your team do?
Well, first of all, I need to evaluate the project if it's doable. I mean, I have to say no many times for projects that are just, I cannot make that deadline. So it's super important to be aware that I want to create more problems being late with the delivery of the scores. If there is like a performance, it's super important not to be too late, because they have rehearsals and everything depends on you. So this is the first step, to evaluate very realistically a material. And then if everything gets approved and everything is fine, usually I start the engraving if it's not a very big material. If it's a huge score, then I ask for help.
What's a huge score?
Like opera material, like full orchestra. It depends on the deadline, because I can write a full orchestra, but it depends on how many pages does it has. If it has something like 100 pages, I cannot make this in 2 weeks. So I need to hire people to help me out. And yeah, we just split the material per sections. Like you write the winds, you write the brass, the woodwinds, the brass, you write the percussion, and you write the strings, you know. And you just split the material like this. Or if there are sections, you make the first part, I make the second movement, you make the third one. It depends on the context a lot.
So you mean that in this case you're basically like 3 or 4 or whatever engravers.
Yeah,
and you,
if it's a material, yes.
And then you proofread each other's work, or what?
Yeah, sometimes like this. And if it's not time, we have an extra person that proofreads while we are writing it. Yeah, well, I forgot what I wanted to say.
We were talking about like how you split the brass and the winds, and sometimes you have one proofreader, sometimes you guys proofread.
I wanted to say that for me, at least, the first 2 days are the most important, because I try to how to say chronometra, to time every page. So I'm writing one full page, and I'm trying to time how many minutes it took me. And after like 10 pages, I'm trying to make like a calculation.
Estimation.
Per day, 5 pages or 10 pages, and then I look at the big picture. I can make in 1 week this many pages, and that's my deadline. You know, I need to meet that deadline, or even I'm trying to push it every time. I'm trying to push it, but that's how I personally know if I need more people to help me out or not. I'm taking one day and working a few hours and trying to make an estimation of how many pages per day I can deliver, how much time do I have, and in 1 week, how many pages do I do? Can I make them all or not? But the engraving process is the easiest one, in my opinion, to make the layout and to make all the parts. Those are time consuming as well. I mean, you always have to take care not to miss that time. I mean, you always think only about engraving and proofreading, and you have 2 weeks. Okay, until the
Wait. So what's engraving then? Because I thought engraving is also layout and
no,
art
engraving is
style.
just notes there, just to add them there. But for example, when I receive a manuscript, you may have or may not have the instruments on a shared stave. You may have flute 1 and 2 on the same stave or not. Sometimes it's a chaos. So what I do is to write each instrument separately, just to make sure that each instrument has the music in the right place, that I'm not missing something. So I write, ignoring how the manuscript was written, I'm just putting each instrument separately, flute 1, 2, oboe 1, 2. And then after the proofreader tells me that the music is in the right place, that nothing is missing, that everything is there, then so the engraving is done. Yeah, the music is written, the engraving is done. Then for the layout of the full score, I have to create a new stave called flute 1, 2, and then put those together on a shared stave again. You know. But it depends. If the music is super simple, I can engrave directly in a shared stave. But usually when music is very complex, even composers, if there's a huge score and they write it by hand, they don't have big pages and they try to squeeze everything onto one page. So even if it doesn't look good to have 2 instruments sharing one stave, they still do it because they don't have space. But that doesn't mean that we have to do it in the final version, you know. So we take this decision separately. First of all, we write the music, and then we see if it's good to share a stave or not.
So I guess the engraving part of the process, it might be very different depending on what kind of decisions the composer has made up to that point. I mean, of course, first whether it's a manuscript or if it's written with a software, and then again about how many staves, how many lines per stave, and these kind of things. So first you kind of have to, let's say, rip all that down and kind of try to build it in a way that will build a good looking and practical score for the performers. Is this what I get?
Yeah. You need to have a system that works no matter how it will look in the end, you know, but you need to make sure that the music is in the right place. And for me, this is the best way. I mean, to write each instrument separately and then merge it, because especially if I receive scores already written in a software, so many times it happens that they forget an adue, or especially in winds, they forget to add elements, you know. And when I'm trying to expand everything and put everything in under each individual stave, I try to notice things. Oh, this looks like a solo line. You meant it adue, or you meant it like a solo flute because it's alone, or, you know. And you start asking questions back to make sure that.
Yeah, this I wanted to ask right now. So I guess the process is a bit different. Like if you would get a score by Haydn or someone who's like very established, and I guess you don't change anything. Like if it's supposed to be as close as possible to the original.
Well, it depends what do you mean by original? Urtext or manuscript? Or there are so many.
That's true.
Variations, you know. It depends on the publisher. Maybe there are publishing houses who don't want to share stave in winds, and they want always to have flutes separately, even if they play the same music. But maybe there are publishers that they want to merge everything where is the case.
So they tell you that, or you have to find it out yourself?
Well, it depends who hires me. If I'm hired by a company, they have a house style and rules, like a huge book.
Okay. Yeah, I understand.
If not, it's my decision. I mean.
Yeah, so when you have like to deal with a composer or someone somewhat individual, or even if there's a company who hires you to write a piece by a composer who's a living composer, and you get either a manuscript or scores directly written in Sibelius or Finale, do you go back to the composer or to the editor to ask, hey, did you mean here a due, or did you mean this? Did you want solo here? Or like, do you have to check with the composer what kind of decisions you're going to be making, or do you just make the decisions that you think are best?
No, of course. I mean, you always have to check with them, but not with everything. I mean, it depends on how big is the change or the question, you know. I don't know, let me tell you a very basic example. Many composers, they write pizzicato unis, for example, in strings. And you always have to write first the division and then how you play. So if I change unis and then pizzicato, I don't have to ask for permission to do this, because these are small changes that improves readability, you know, and this is how it should be done. So there are small things that I have to do without asking anything. But if there are major changes or questions, of course, I do ask. So many times it happens that they forget to add some dynamic, or they repeat a section which was a little bit different in the first time, and I want to make sure that the change in the second time when the same theme appears, it's intentionally done. It's not a mistake, or you know. So after I'm going through all the material, I have a list with many questions, just to make sure that yeah, that we're on the same page. And if I'm making even editorial decisions, they write things in some way, and I think it's better to write them in another way. I tell them this, you know, just to make sure that what I understand it's correct.
Niilo.
So let's pretend that I have a publisher who's hired you, and I'm sending you an orchestra score where all instruments have their own lines, and then all in places where they enter have the dynamics. There are enough of articulations and stuff like that. All the notes are on their places. So is it in this kind of case, is it so that you just check that everything is according to the house style just by dragging them or just reorganizing something, or do you still have to kind of basically write everything again?
No. If it's already engraved like this, no. But this example, it's not very common. I mean, I never get like.
So it doesn't happen often.
No. And well, I don't work, as I said, with many composers, but in this European Film Philharmonic Institute, I work with arrangers, many arrangers. They adapt the film score to whatever instrumentation we need for the orchestra. And yeah, everybody has their own preferences, you know, of writing things. And even if you give them house rules, it's very difficult to change some ways of doing things, you know. It's like a language. You got used to talk like this. You cannot talk differently just for this project, you know. So it's a little bit difficult to change that.
But like, I mean, I guess were you, Niilo, asking if like you get a score that is already written in Sibelius and it's already done very well? If Corina has to write a new score or has to like just change the existing score, right? That's what you?
Not, no, no, no. We use the same material all the time, but I just import my house style over it.
Ah, okay, okay.
Yeah, I import the house style over it, and then
Yeah. My question was kind of intentional, stupid question, just to
no, of course, no. It's a waste of time to do it all again. No, I'm working on the material that I'm receiving. But yeah, many times when you import your own house style and you reset everything,
It's a mess.
it's a mess.
Yeah.
Yes.
Of course, one question is, how can you know all this? Like, how can you have all this basic practice with dealing with scores and then be able to quickly adapt to different house rules? So I guess this has to be something with your background. So my next question is actually, what was your path to this? What did you do before being an engraver, and how did you become one?
I started cello when I was super young, and my brother is a cellist also, but everybody knows that it's a tough industry playing a music instrument in general. So since I was a very small kid, my brother always told me, like, you need a plan B. You always need a plan B in your life. No, try not to rely only on one thing. And in the same time, um, I when I was a kid, I think 6, 7 years old, the computers appeared and the internet in everybody's home. And I was fascinated by everything. Um, I, I I loved trying to disable, how to say, to put things apart and put them back together, a computer, you know. And every time my internet went down and I had to call the tech guy, or my parents had to, every time he came to our house to repair, he had to explain to me everything that he was doing. It was like a big rule. So I was very into computers and technology since I was a very small kid. Then I started with Sibelius a little bit for my own projects and some very small songs. But at some point when I was at the music university, I studied solo cello. I received a score to play. It was called Pampeana by Alberto Ginastera. It was really, really nice. I love that piece. And right, like a couple of days before my exam, I had to do a repetition with a pianist, you know. And my teacher, he didn't have the piano reduction. He couldn't find it anywhere on the internet, nowhere. And he just said, like, we're gonna change the song. You cannot perform this because we don't have the piano. And I was like, no, I love this. I have to perform this. And 2 days before my exam, I learned Sibelius, and I found the music score on a website, but I couldn't download it, but I could see it. So I had to copy the whole material in one day, and I had no clue how Sibelius worked. And I copied the whole piano reduction, piano part. And the next day at 7 a.m. with no sleep, I just delivered it to the pianist, and I said, like, you have to play this because I worked all night. I want to perform this song in the exam. And everything went nice. The exam was good, and my teacher told to the commission board, to the other teachers, he said, like, you know, Corina wrote this piano part because she really liked to perform this song to you. And one of the teachers, he said, like, oh, you know that it's a career. You can have a career from doing this. And yeah, I just ignored that information. But after I finished the music university, that thing started to came back to my mind, and I was like, let's try and do this. And it was difficult. I was super lucky that after I finished the university, I went to, I applied to many youth orchestras in Europe, and I traveled a lot for like 2 years, almost non-stop. I didn't stay home, not at all. I traveled from one country to another, to one tour to another. And every time I was in Europe, I tried to go to publishing houses door and just ask if they can have me I want to learn. And I think that was a good thing, because I didn't just send an email, they saw me. And I started to work a little bit with some companies, but anyway, at least once per year, I sent like hundreds of emails to all the companies around the globe. So I was really obsessed in trying to apply somewhere, but it is super difficult, especially that you cannot have a university degree in this area of expertise. You know, it's very difficult. And at some point, I ended up working for Note and Graphic Berlin, it's called. It's not a publishing house, it's an agency, as I told you before. Like, they receive scores from famous publishing houses, and they are a really, really good team there, and they teach me so many things. I worked a lot in contemporary music, and I also did an internship there, which helped me a lot to be in-house, not to only work remote. So I moved to Berlin for a while, and I learned from them. They teach me Sibelius, and they teach me to be really fast, because they were like Germans. They didn't wanted me to spend time, you know, like I needed to learn all the shortcuts, everything, even like using a mouse. They said, like, you cannot use the mouse so much because it takes time for you from the keyboard to the mouse. You lose time. You just need to learn to work with Sibelius with no mouse, because you're just wasting the time making this movement. You need to be super fast, you know, like a black belt.
I couldn't live without the mouse, I have to say.
Wow. I guess just to say as a comment, I think this is where composers' life and engravers' life is very different, must be, because at least for me, if there is something that is slightly slow in my working, it doesn't matter that much, because I need the time probably for thinking what I am actually doing and making the decisions. But I can imagine that if I would already have the thing that I just need to kind of just do it. So then it would be a totally different thing, and I would be needing all the possible quick commands and every shortcuts to do everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very technical job what I have. It's not creative or like composers do. So for me, it's like just a mathematical equation, kind of, you know. I need to know how to resolve some things, and quickly, because it's on my time.
And like about notation software, there's like I think 3 main ones nowadays: Sibelius, Finale, and now there's Dorico also. There's MuseScore, but it's just not so. I mean, that's mostly for writing quick scores. It's not any huge professional.
Yeah.
So I guess you use Sibelius, but do editors know how to learn all these programs, or they use only one, or how does it go?
Well, it depends. I know people who knows them all. I know people who works only in Finale, but in the end, it depends on the publishing house or the client who hires you. If there's a publishing house, they usually have a specific request. We want only Sibelius or only Finale. I personally, I've noticed that many of them are working with Sibelius mostly, but there are differences between them. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It's just what you got used with. And I know only Sibelius, and I wanted to learn Dorico for such a long time, but I don't have the time. I mean, it's super risky for me to start wasting time or a project on a new software. I really need some time off, but I'm waiting to find it, to learn.
So is Sibelius, would you say, the most used program for engravers around the world, or you couldn't say?
No, I couldn't say. Just in my circle, it's more Sibelius than Finale. My clients are most of them with Sibelius. But even if you work with Finale, I mean, you can still work together a little bit. It depends on the projects and how complex it is. But yeah, you can work even if you're in a different software. Depends a lot.
Interesting. Maybe as a follow-up to this software discussion, how about if you need to do something that is not notation-wise traditional, that doesn't only use traditional elements, but it may have some special clefs or some graphic elements or something like this that is sometimes needed in contemporary music.
Yeah,
Yeah.
drawings.
Is this more hard and time consuming for an engraver, or do you also have some quick ways to do that efficiently?
It's very hard before you start. You know, when you receive the contemporary music, you need to look at all the elements, and until you start putting the music there, you need to think ahead how you are going to do the graphics, because there's some things that you can import in Sibelius, like a clef, and apply it every time or things, but many things are just done in the end in another software. Like I use Inkscape and I create elements there and I just like draw them on the score. But it depends. Sometimes I create my own fonts and to help me out not do so many drawings. So for example, if you have like let's say a vibrato that goes like this and then this and then this again, you know, there are some graphics like this very often. And instead of drawing them every time, I just created a font that goes with big waves and smaller waves, and you know, and I just apply a font every time, but it takes me a while to create that font for this project. So the starting point is a little bit slower because you need to know what elements are going to be purely graphic, what elements are going to be imported as a font, as a photo, and yeah, it is much difficult than traditional classical music, and it is more complex, of course, and very time consuming. So the contemporary music in general takes pretty much time.
So in this kind of case, you might end up using several softwares and importing stuff from one place to another.
Yes,
in order to make it possible. I'm just imagining if there will be some future where some software could have so many things inside of it that you could immediately like put there some Lachenmann clef showing that you play the cello here, and then you could turn some wavy feature from there, and you know, without having to import anything or do your own combinations of stuff.
I think that if you always work with this kind of material, you will get much faster because you're going to have your own house style with these elements included, you know. So yeah, it gets easier, but I don't get so much contemporary music lately because I work for film music industry, and yeah, but I can still do them. It's just it's harder, definitely.
I only use Sibelius, and I've used a bit of MuseScore. How is it called? MuseScore.
MuseScore.
MuseScore, yeah. So with those, at least, it's pretty difficult to do signs. But I understood from other people who use Finale that that's better if you want to do proper graphic notation. So
yeah, I heard.
Yeah, so I think it's also a matter of what program you're using, but I guess some programs are better for other things and some programs are better for other things.
Yeah, they're both great, but they both have upsides and downsides, and you just need to work with them and adapt.
Yeah.
At least up to this point, I have always been able to do everything with Sibelius I wanted.
How is it with with price ranges. So what can you tell us about that? Like if let's say a publisher wants you to do a hypothetical, I don't know, piano concerto that takes 20 minutes or 25 minutes and it's I don't know how many pages. Let's say 70
I
pages.
think in minutes because quarter note can be high or low. So I think in pages, and um, it's it's very difficult to make a price because you cannot have a fixed price in this industry. I think. I mean, I see many engravers who have a fixed price, but I don't find it a good way of thinking because you can have full scores with 4 bars per page or full scores with 12 bars per page, you know. So it's, you cannot think like that. I personally think about whole project, you know, like how much time do I think I need to do this, and what is the amount of money that it will satisfy me, you know, will make me happy to do this. So I think project wise, not per page, or it's not a fixed price. In the end, I can say to my client, look, this is the price, it goes like this per page, you know. But I don't start thinking to a project based on the page, you know, first. I think about the whole project and then think how much it will cost one page approximately. But some other engravers, they calculate per hour of work, I think. Everybody's different, but yeah, I think I calculate per project, and it depends. Full score can go from 20 euros.
Let's imagine somebody would suggest you a project that you would then approximate that you will need 3 weeks of your own time, but you don't need to hire any extras. How would you price that kind of project?
Well, it depends a lot on how much work is it to do, because 3 weeks, I don't work 12 hours per day only for one project for 3 weeks, you know. It depends on how many scores do I need to do and what kind of instruments are there. But I don't know, it really depends on context, you know. I think for composers it's the same thing. You need to know what are you going to compose, and you don't have like a fixed price like in the store, you know. One bread is like this much. It depends. So a full score definitely goes at least 20-30 euros per page, up to 100 euro per page. It's for example, a couple of years ago, I needed help with a Romanian score, and I asked prices to the first 10 companies of engraving from Google. You know, I needed price ranges. So I wrote to everybody, this is the score, and there were like 70 pages of a Romanian composer, nothing contemporary, only standard notation. And the price range from 12 companies was between 1,000 euro up to 15,000 euros for the same score.
Jesus Christ.
No, it's crazy. I was surprised also. I mean, but I think it was only one offer for 1,000 euro. So most of them were between 8 and 15. It was crazy, and it took them like 6 months to deliver it. I'm like, it will be too much. So it depends, where do you live? What are the costs of living in your country? I think, of course, I'm not sure. No, I think nobody has an exact price, or even if you talk with professional engravers like me, everybody's like, we have no idea. Just try to adapt to your client. It depends who's your client. It's an institution, because they have different budgets, institutions, than composers. You know, they cannot afford the same budgets as a philharmonic publishing.
At least in Finland, we have pretty fixed prices for like we have a place in the Union Composers page where it's really set like solo piece up to 5 minutes, it's this sum, and trio up to this minutes is and then you kind of try to make your estimations around that, and of course there is variation, and of course people don't all Usually, I think people get paid less than that than more than that. But there's also something like this for arrangers, and yes, something like copying a score. I've seen prices for that are like in Finland for from the union, something like official prices. But if I'm an editor and I want to hire someone, I would rather pay 1,000 than 15,000. No, so does that mean that I'm hiring people from countries that are like with lower, let's say,
Not,
standard of life?
not really, because that offer with 1,000 euros was from UK. So
Okay.
I just think that some people assume that they know what they're doing. Sometimes, I'm not sure if this was the case here, but many arrangers, they think they are editors or engravers, which is not always the case. I mean, they just think that, okay, I'm just gonna put this full score here and make some parts. No, doesn't matter how they look, you know. So they don't go into very deep details. That's what I'm trying to say. I think they just they think that if they check some things, it works, and it may work for them. So I think that sometimes super lower prices can give you lower quality. But publishing houses, they have their own prices. They work for so many years in this industry that they know what are the price range. And even look, I worked 4 years already in this film industry, and I don't know what is my price per page for them. They always tell me, this project, this money. It doesn't matter if they're 5 pages or 20, because some 20 pages I can do them in 2 hours, and some 4 pages I can do them in 1 week.
And
It
then you
depends.
say yes or no.
Yeah, exactly. But they never say like, look, we have this project, this is the price per page, you know. So it's like, this is a project.
Niilo.
Yeah.
Maybe the problem that I'm thinking here is that, okay, of course, the publishing houses or agencies or, you know, other actors on the field who are very used to do this all the time. Of course, they have some, you know, good intuition on what is too low price, what is too high price, and so on. But I'm just thinking, for example, if you are if you have a small organization that is organizing a festival with really many concerts, and then you want to have new pieces to them, and you want that they are commissioned from professional composers, and then you would like the music also be engraved nicely. So from who to really ask, like, or how kind of how could this kind of organization who doesn't have this prior experience know how much to put money to the budget to get what they really want? I think this is a question that comes into my mind. Is it only so that we who are not yet in the system, we just need to ask the big houses until they until you know we get hired by them? Or is it or could it be so that there could be more openness about it, so that, you know, even more indie organizations could kind of start be more active on this field? I don't know, I'm just speaking out loud what I'm thinking.
Honestly, I have no idea how to answer that. I mean, it's a very weird field to say like this. I mean, nobody speaks much about it, and nobody knows about this very much. I don't know how you should proceed if you're like a small organization. If I needed some engraving and I make like concerts with an orchestra, and if I needed some engraver to do me like a composer's work, I would not know where to start looking for them. Really, I have no idea, because I don't think Google is the best place to be. And in this industry, it's just by having recommendations from one person to another. That's it. And regarding prices, well, I don't know what these organizations are thinking. They never had something before. But yeah, I have no idea how to calculate this or how to make an idea if it's too much or too low. It's just, it depends on your budget, and you have to ask around to more people to make an estimation. I don't know.
I also wanted to ask, since you have to hire sometimes people or not, like when you make your prices for what you're choosing, do you take into account how many people you're going to be working with or not? Because I guess it matters. Let's say a project pays 5,000 euros, and like if you would have a certain amount of time, you know that maybe you could do it by yourself, so you would get all the money. But then if you have less time, then you have to hire other 4 people, then you all get 1,000, which is in the end a big difference. So how do you balance that?
Well, of course, I'm thinking about this before I make the price. And if we have a hypothetical budget of 5,000 euros and I have 5 people in my team, we won't split it in 5 because it's different work for everybody. I mean, a proofreader won't take as much money as an engraver, which takes more time to write as one page than to read it. So there are different price ranges, but in the end, I always don't think about price per page. I just think if there are, like, I don't know, a couple of pages to proofread, I'm trying in my head to estimate how much time it will take to the other proofreader to do them. Yeah, so if it takes them like 3 days, I cannot pay them 1,000 euros for 3 days. It's it's not realistically. So I'm just thinking what would make me happy. Like, you know, would you want a couple of €100s for this work? It's only 3 days of work. It's not much. It's not hard. You will have to do like 20 pages per day. Do you have the time? And if you compare it with the salaries in that country, which everything, some people can earn that money, which is the medium salary per 1 month in general, and they can gain that money in 3 days. So, you know, there are many things to consider. Where do they live? How much is the rent there? And what is their input on that project? Of course, you cannot split it in 5 because it's not equal work. It's something else. Everybody has their own share.
And since we are at everybody is working differently, I know that you have done some work by yourself also, that you have tried to rework on some old scores by Romanian composers. Can you tell us a bit about that? You also have some kind of pro bono part of your work, or?
Yeah, well, I wanted to, many years ago, I wanted to gain more experience, and I realized that in Romania it was a disaster when it came to music scores. I am a cellist and I played new music, and it's just that, first of all, nobody teaches you how to write correct scores, you know, like it's like a vocabulary. Nobody teaches you this in music university. You don't have a class. You have a class of Sibelius, but not music engraving or standards in the industry, which is super important, I think. But nobody tells the composers anything about that. So they're like chaotic. Everybody writes however they think it's correct. So every time a Romanian composer approached me, I tried to do it on a very, very low budget or not at all. It depends on the project. Because I tried to help them. I felt like the need to make people want this more, and they didn't even knew what a music engraver did, because they never had one around to see the difference, you know. And in Romania, it's another problem because in Europe, you have a very precise time with the orchestra, you know. You cannot waste time on a bad score. It's very expensive for somebody to waste time with so many people on stage guessing what means this, or something is missing or is wrong, you know. So a music engraver basically saves a lot of time and money on your rehearsal time, which is super important. In Romania, rehearsal time is not very strict, you know, and everybody's more relaxed. Nobody is very tight with the schedule. So it didn't cost money for them if a music score was horrible. They just, you have to adapt, you have to just go and try to do the best you can, you know. So I started to work with some Romanian composers. They really enjoyed, they really saw the difference with what they did before and how the scores look now. And at some point I got hired by the Romanian Radio Orchestra. I worked for them 1 year only as a music engraver and editor. I was alone there, but they wanted just to perform more Romanian music. And the thing is that the scores look horrible because nobody performed them since the 40s, I think, or 50s. And they're written by hand and they look very bad. So they wanted to record some of them and perform some of them, and they couldn't do that with those materials.
Niilo.
I guess the orchestral culture has also changed dramatically in the past decades, so that nowadays, whatever country, people are trying to be more effective how they use their time, and this is really different from the time when how things used to be. And then we also have possibility to the effectivity, because I guess the whole engraving culture was also very different in the time when everything was done by hand compared to nowadays, when you can customize things very precisely on computer. And you know, I'm not big expert on this, but just based on to the extent I have seen handwritten scores and the computer written scores, I kind of know that it's a different world.
Yeah, it is, of course. I mean, there were like different needs back then and different techniques, and it took much more time to do a project, of course.
So what do you do? What you said you were working for the Romanian orchestra for the radio. Then what happened? You found these old scores and.
Well, yeah, I started to work with the radio orchestra, Romanian radio orchestra, and started to do many Romanian old scores. It was very interesting, and the musicians were really happy to finally have to play from clean materials. It's very difficult to perform from old ones. And after that, I got pregnant, so I didn't work with them anymore, but I still collaborate with them a lot. And I decided that talking with people, I have many musicians that when they need a score, they ask me. And I realized that a couple of years ago, somebody, a quartet from a philharmonic, they had to perform Christmas something, an event, and they asked me, Corina, the manager of the philharmonic, he wants us to perform Romanian music, a string quartet. Where do we get it? What can we have? And I had no idea. And then I realized that nobody put things together. It's a chaos. So first of all, there are only some like encyclopedias, like
encyclopedias.
Yeah.
Everybody gets it, yeah.
Yeah, with composers. So if you want to verify composers, you have these books by Viorel Cosma, and you just go to UNESCO and you see what he composed there. But if you want to know who composed for string quartet, so reverse search, you cannot find that information.
Yeah, so
Nowhere.
there is no proper database.
Nothing, zero. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the main problem is that, let's say you have that database. After you find it, where do you go? Because nobody has that music together in one place. I mean, everything is in the basements and nobody knows exactly what they have because nobody performed them in the last 80 years because they don't care about Romanian music because it looks very bad and the musicians cannot play that material. So it just sits somewhere there. So I found like a book. It was the only book that had some titles ordered by instrument category. You know, so it was a book from the 70s, I think, or something like this. And I took that book and I tried to count and see. It was like orchestra, symphonic music. How many composers, who wrote it, and where you can find that material. And I tried to see at the radio orchestra how many Romanian symphonic scores are there. And based on that book, I found like 80 titles, 80 songs, 80 pieces. You know, and then I went to the radio orchestra and asked them to give me access to their library register. And I started to count the scores. And I think there are at least 4,000 or 5,000 scores. So it's such a huge difference and nobody knows what's there exactly. So I have two projects going on right now. One of them will be released in 1 month, which is a website where you can search based on instrument category for Romanian titles. You know, so all the books will be put on this platform and you can search violin music and you will see who composed what and how much. Nobody knows how much symphonic music was written ever or how many string quartets were. Nobody has this info. So this is the first thing that I'm working on right now. And you wanted to say something?
I think this is a beautiful example of how music promotion goes together with the databases where you can search stuff, and then of course that you have well engraved musical materials that are stored together. If one of these let's say legs is missing, then the chair will fall, and you know the pieces will not get performed as much as they would deserve.
Unfortunately, the process is very complex and difficult, and there are no budgets for it. I mean, for this platform to search for music that was funded by the cultural minister, how do you say, institution of culture. But to engrave all that music, I estimated that it will take me around 15 years, and with a team like 6-7 people.
Yeah, you would need an army to do it in like 2 years.
And I'm still trying to access like European fundings and everything, but unfortunately on patrimony, cultural music, or you don't have fundings right now. So we would need like to have a team hired for many years to do this like a regular job, to only engrave. And not only engrave, the thing is that I realized that after I make this statistic of music, where do you find it? Because this website, it's only for musicians to have some inspiration, you know, maybe, yeah, let's try to perform a string trio. If you want to do that now, you don't know where to go, start look for some ideas. Who composed trios?
Yes, and once you've decided you're going to play that piece, you realize that there is no proper score for it.
You don't know where to look for it.
And you don't know where to look for it.
You literally don't know. You have to call maybe all the music university from the country or not. So it's like it's a huge gap.
Or to find the living relatives of that composer to ask if they have it in the basement.
they don't usually know either. I mean, it's a chaos.
Really?
So
Okay.
yeah, nobody knows very much. So what I'm doing right now is that I started to scan all the basements of the music institutions from the country. So that's what I want to do. I started with the radio orchestra, so they have like 5,000 titles there, and it's in a very bad condition, of course. And what the first thing that got into my mind is that let's save it. You need to have them on a drive.
Yeah, on a digital format.
Yeah, because if something happens, I don't know, fire, earthquake, whatever, that those are the only copies ever. And maybe you have like a very important manuscript there and you have no idea about it because you don't know what you have in there. You have no idea. So yeah, now almost every day I'm going there pro bono and I'm taking scores from the basement. I scan them and put them back. And after that, I have an agreement with the Music University from Cluj-Napoca and then Romanian Opera House. And I'm trying to do things one by one because it's a lot of work. And until I have fundings, I cannot do more because I need people to be hired to do this. And after we scan all the music, we compare them with the website to see if there's things that are missing or if there's more things that the books didn't have them. Maybe, for example, Ciprian Porumbescu is very well-known composer internationally. In all the books, it's written that he composed around 200 songs. Everybody knows about a couple of them. I don't know which are those hundreds of songs, you know, so maybe if I can find something in some basement, I have no idea. But yeah, it's a disaster, the level of ignorance regarding the heritage of Romanian music. And yeah, I'm alone trying to find some fundings and try to see what I can do to put things a little bit together.
Sounds like an amazing project, and if I were a very rich or European Union, you would be the first person I would be funding, if you ask me.
Thank you. Thank you.
So all the millionaires here watching, donate.
Yeah, Corina, has been really a pleasure to have you. This was very interesting for me. I learned a lot from this discussion, and I hope that people watching this have also. So you have been tuning into Key Culture Podcast with Matei, Gheorghiu and Niilo Tarnanen, and today Corina Ciuplea. Of course, like, share and subscribe, and you can imagine the echo, and click the, click the bell icon for notification, whatever. Just do everything in your power to tune into Key Culture Podcast. All right, have a great day, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Have a nice day.